baritone voice into the mix. And then the next is to bring your beautiful, also I think baritone, if I'm not mistaken.
Baritone.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Baritone voice into the mix. And then we get rid of the intro song. And we get rid of the overcover. And it's us, visibly. Now, you and I, of course, also monitoring the stream, which is super delayed by several tens of seconds.
Yes, I'm still just seeing Questboard Gaming.
It's just Questboard Gaming there. We're going to see this. This will be real time for the audience. It's so interesting to hear this almost every time we do it.
There we go.
Oh, shit, right? That beautiful... These aren't two separate scenes. I just have a layer that I just make invisible and everything. I'm not like doing an OBS scene transition with a wipe or anything like that. That's the level of professionalism I bring. Welcome to Quest Board Gaming, episode 6.
Dang, we've really done 6 of these
Yeah,
already?
we've done 6 of them fully unorganized, and this episode, my beautiful blue-haired bosom buddy is about world building. It's about world building.
I'm ready.
Oh, look, I didn't change the actual description of the episode. I feel good about that. It's too late now. It's not about TTRPG design. It's about world building. I forgot about it.
Get your shit together,
Jesus.
Steve. Come on.
I know, right? You'd think...
This is a serious, high-end production we're running here. And you're dropping the ball.
You know what? This is why I'll never be successful in life. It's the detail work.
It's really because you just haven't had your hookah for the last 4 hours.
Right? If I don't have nicotine just pumping into me at all times. So
we'll
number
get you
one,
patches you can wear.
There's patches.
Patches.
But will they make my mouth taste? Could I have a patch that comes with like a LaCroix, so I get a hint of the flavor and the nicotine separately as like a still, I guess
so. Yeah, I can set that up for you, buddy.
Thank you. Yeah. Speaking of nicotine and hookahs, this episode is sponsored by. No, it's not sponsored by anyone. What am I talking about?
This is sponsored by your favorite brand of hookah shisha.
Al Fakir Orange Mint Hookah. Al Fakir. It's inexpensive, but shockingly better than it should be. Anyway, no, what I was going to say is, speaking of hookahs and nicotine and world building, we're going to be talking about world building. We're going to be giving some tips, but I'm going to note that one of my favorite things about being a hookah smoker and world building in general is, of course, the fact that anytime there are villains in a world, anytime there are, post-apocalypse and there's like angry Mad Maxian style gangs that will run you down, or like bikers on, out in the Midwest. There's hookahs. There's always hookahs in the scene. There's always hookahs. And because I smoke a hookah, I see them. It's like having a car that you bought recently and then realizing how many other of that model of car are out there. As a hookah smoker, I always spot a hookah prop on a set. They're not always being smoked, but they're always like there.
How many times do they show up in Star Wars?
So they show up in A New Hope, and they show up in Empire. They're much more fantastistical, but it's essentially hose smoke device. They show up, that whole casino scene in the sequel trilogy that has some hookahs in it.
Does Jabba have one on his barge in Return of the Jedi?
There's ones in the there's ones in the background. I can't remember. I don't think Jabba ever takes a draw from it, but yeah.
He definitely has one handy.
Yeah, there's always a hookah in the background, and it's because it's probably like Middle Eastern phobias, but like in other things, like there's probably like a real dark subconscious
Well, it's definitely
reason.
kind of an exoticism.
But yeah, it's definitely an exoticism, right? Yeah, we didn't ever really do hookahs in until that kind of water-based pipe bubbler.
So, just to kind of get it out of the way, because I have a world building hot take.
Yeah, we're doing this I'll bring structure to this in a bit, but we're doing this kind of wild fucking thought board right now.
So my world building hot take is that the vast majority of DMs who do world building do a lot of garbage that they never are going to use, and it's purely for their own self
Yeah,
entertainment.
to be clear, by garbage we mean a lot of fat, a lot of trimmable stuff that
Stuff
you
that's
could.
not going to ever see
Yeah,
the light of
it's
day.
cutting room floor.
Garbage is not. I don't mean to say that their writing is bad or their ideas are bad, though I've seen plenty of terrible world building too. Um, uh, but what I mean by that is that someone sits down and they try and like conceptualize a whole world,
Mm-hmm.
and they try and come down with it, all these details at every single layer, and then almost all of it, if not all of it, becomes inconsequential and meaningless once it actually makes contact with your game.
Yes.
And yeah, so I'm just like, I'm very much like, if you're doing it for your own entertainment and your own your
Fine.
own, go for it.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to do world building for game design, for your TTRPG, this is going to call back to something we've said plenty of times: less is more.
Yep. Stop. Yeah. If it stresses you out, if it extends your prep time and you feel like it's becoming a chore, you can do less of that chore. No one's eating off that floor. You don't need to make it a floor that you can eat off of. It needs to just be clean.
And not just that, but if you're building for a game and you want to build stuff that's usable, you don't need to figure out, which factions are arguing over taxation of trade routes over the planet Naboo.
No, you simply
don't.
You simply don't. God, I cannot recommend Andor enough for doing. It's like, this is how you do political intrigue, and it's good. Like, it's good and enjoyable and thrilling to watch, instead of seemingly flatly delivered on distant panel screens. You know what? We're just gonna mess with something here on the OBS, because it is we're getting a lot of, well, that's happening at Riverside. Never mind. The video program is doing it. I'm not gonna fix it. Later this will be on Zoom, and so the next version there won't be the little weird flickers, but nonetheless, so let's talk about that. Let's dive into that excessive world building. So why do you think, Brandon, that a lot of DMs, with all good intent and enthusiasm, might I add, build out so much of their world before they even really begin or are significantly into their campaigns?
And this is going to get into another hot take I have related to this, is I feel like DMs, and I know this because I'm guilty of it, is that you want to build a world that is thoroughly documented for the sake of creating verisimilitude.
Yep.
I'm hoping I'm saying that right.
Yeah, you are.
And so, like, you want to create a world that feels real. You want to create a world that feels lived in and tangible. But what ends up happening is you create so much material that it becomes an unwieldy monster. That there's so much going on that you can't possibly remember anything about the world. And so one of two things happens. You either forget stuff and then are constantly having to go back and retcon shit, or
How about now?
I think we're good.
Okay.
What was the last thing you heard me say?
Refresh. Verisimilitude. There we go. Although I think with YouTube it actually eventually pushes it through.
It looks like we're back up and running now on YouTube too.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so I think the last thing I was saying, you're either forgetting stuff and then having to correct things after the fact, or you've created something so large and clunky that you're constantly having to reference your world building document, and as a result, you bog down your game by trying to make sure your world is perfect. Um, and instead, my thought process behind this is to take an almost reverse concept to your world building. Do your world building in reverse. Instead of thinking like you're from the ground up, think from your players to the ground.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is start off with literally like a fascia for the world. Like, what are the things that they immediately see? And those do not have to have depth to them yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then let your players interact with those. This is something that Steve has actually been doing. I can tell
Mm-hmm.
by the way he's been running our game. Is he sketched out a big world.
Yep.
And he had a few places with a few bits of details about them, but he didn't go crazy into depth on them. And I bet he didn't write a bunch about it either. He just had the surface level details about what this region was, what that region was. Not a whole lot going on. He wasn't sitting down writing down the names of the people and the towns in those places.
Not once. Not one time.
And then as we went into those spaces, he could then populate them as he anticipated where we were going.
I am a big believer in you plan your overall idea based off what your party, like your recommendation is 100% on point. Based off what your players and their characters want, you populate your overall kind of plot, your ethos, your grand challenge. In our case, because it's a long campaign, it's of course you got to kill God. I mean, that's a gimme, right?
You got to kill God.
You got to kill God.
Every campaign.
Every campaign.
And we got to destroy capitalism while we're at it.
Destroy capitalism, kill God, bring down the existing power structures of the world, right? But yeah, you have to do this whole big thing, right? And everything. So you have that kind of in there, and you have sort of the vibe and the feel and sort of like the overall thing. And again, you're really taking these cues from your players. But then, other than that, really all I'm doing is planning out the area we're in with the loosest of beats, and then really just planning the next session out. Or maybe the next two sessions. It's oftentimes the next two sessions out because the players always take longer to get through the things than, and not as a fault, just an inevitability that I'm going to plan a little bit more stuff just so that I don't run out of things that the players burn through it. So in my mind, it's like 2 sessions out, but that's also, my sessions are like 2.5 hours. If I was running like 4 or 5 hour sessions, it would literally just be 1 session out. And that way, everything the players do in the given session we're in directly impacts the next session. That is directly informing it. And it makes, in my mind, that is the fastest way to start mentally attuning yourself to what the players are doing in your world is what your world is about. It is not about whatever you've decided it's about. You already kind of got that, right? You've already kind of got that overall theme. You're creating the overall major conflicts and coming up with clever ideas all the time for them, but it's more interesting if it's wherever they exist. My entire plot is being constantly adjusted and tweaked based off of what happened in last session, so that the big markers are still relatively the same. But this isn't a book. This isn't even a script on a show with multiple writers where you have to turn in all the scripts before you begin filming production. It's literally like live improv theater with a continuous serialized story. So you can just be like, all right, well, that happened last time. What am I going to do next time because of that?
And here's, one of the things that Steve and I have also been talking about quite a bit lately is using pre-existing material and random tables to generate your world as you go through it.
It's fun. It's a challenge.
It's fun. It's challenging, but it also lets you create your world. Like I said, create your world as you explore it. And that saves you time at prep time, so you can just spend more time playing your game. And then, let's say you're doing some exploration, right? You're going out in the world. You're doing a hex crawl of a world map, and you decide, okay, we're gonna roll on this table and see what we generate in this tile, and you get like some ruins. But you didn't write down, you didn't plan out the world, but now you have an object that your players discovered that is now your opportunity to seed lore into your game.
Yeah. Now maybe you have a note somewhere, or you're watching a show.
I think we're having connectivity problems.
Are we? We shouldn't be.
Okay. Should I just keep going?
Yeah, just keep going. You're good. Oh, maybe that's on. Maybe this connectivity problem for once isn't mine. Oh my goodness. We've lost Brandon for a little bit, so I'm going to fill the gap. While Brandon is out. What's happening is that we're talking about kind of giving yourself surprises, right? And so giving yourself surprises as a GM can often be hard because usually it's the players that surprise you. Copy link. See if I can get Brandon back here. There he is.
That was weird because I was still in Riverside on my end and you just couldn't hear me.
Super weird because I was like, you went dark. But giving yourself surprises on your side, give me just a moment to fix the OBS so that your head comes in. Okay, it should fix itself. There we go. It's doing a bunch of stuff.
Yep. Give yourself surprises, but the other thing that's nice about this is it lets you be more flexible with your world. So, like, if you want there to be a coincidence that, like, happens, rather than, like, having, like, their whole world structured out in front of you and hoping that the two paths of these things cross, you can just intuitively make that happen kind of retroactively. If you want to, introduce a character who is a spy. Well, that NPC they met 3 sessions back that you were just like, oh, that's just a friendly character. No, now that character is the spy.
No, they're the spy. You needed a spy. They were a spy. That's fine. If you're not planning too far out in advance, you're not giving yourself things to get rid of. You're not taking away from your existing plans. You're doing things, and again, advance means a lot for a lot of different people. For some people, it means a few sessions out. For me, it means literally just like the next session or two. I know when I do like the podcast, Low Armor Cast, because I'm prepping for that for next Saturday. To go back and start recording that again. When I do that, it's a little bit more deliberate because I'm also putting in like a bunch of punchlines and jokes and concepts. So I do a lot more still, but I'm still only planning, like I only know what's going to happen in the region we're in still. I don't know what's going to happen in the next region. The most I know about the next region is like what's the main bit that the region is built around, what's like the quirk or the hook for it. But like that's it.
Yeah.
I don't know because it helps in every faction, right? It helps when you're in combat. You're planning out your next session or your next couple sessions. You know you've got combat, but what if in this session combat happened to be, because of the rolls of the dice or random choices by the players, really super difficult. And it wasn't planned to be difficult. It just ended up being difficult. Lots of failures, lots of lacks of success, lots of challenges, maybe a puzzle that was too hard. If I already had this really complicated, even if you have something as more deliberate as a dungeon that you're going to be going multiple sessions through, if I had something that was really complicated that felt really challenging, and it was fun, but it was there, and then I had something planned that was supposed to be more challenging, maybe I peel back on that a little bit, because I'm only like one session out, and I can keep kind of pivoting what worked, what didn't work, and rearranging it, because the players only know what you give them in the moment. And if they're your friends or they're people you're comfortable with, you can be fully transparent and be like, listen, I'm not making this up as I go, but I am writing the homework the night before it's due, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And as long as it's fun, no one's going to care that that's how you did it. And there's no value. It's cool if you can build a whole world and you can build all that out, and that's super fun. But one is not better than the other. They're the same. They're equal, because the point is, are the sessions fun? That's the point.
Yes, I mean your ultimate focus should of course just be making sure the game is fun, and of course prep time can be fun, and building your world can be fun. Though I definitely am like opposed to large scale world building, unless you guys are talking about a pre-established world.
Yeah. If you're playing in a world,
for you,
yeah,
that's fine. But obviously you're not doing world building.
What
I don't want to do is I'm going to share one of my favorite little books I've read recently. I've been wanting to run this dungeon, and I shared this with Steve before. And this one called The Maze of the Blue Medusa. And there's a lot of world building in here, but the reason why it works is it's all done on a very narrow scale, very narrow focus. And there's literally a few pages of the history of the characters in this dungeon, but it literally stays only focused on those characters.
Yeah.
It doesn't try to establish the world at large. It doesn't try to connect those people's places in the world, and that actually makes it so that you can take this and plug it into your own world easily.
Yeah, it's not like, that's the thing, is that world building is oftentimes thought of as world building, like a very Tolkien-esque, like, here are the histories and the ages, here's the religions, here's the trade, the rise and fall of this kingdom. And I actually do have a fair amount of that for our campaign that has evolved and changed as it's become more relevant and as the players have made choices. But the thing is that the other thing that being really strict with world building does, or being really not even strict but over prepared, is it takes room out of the game. Because a lot of GMs are out there, they're like, okay, I'm playing this, and if you're playing with a whole bunch of brand new people, this is probably not the path, although I still should think that it would encourage it. But all right, so let's say that you're in a campaign and you're wandering around, and you as the DM are I want to involve my players' backstories, so we're going to go back to one of the characters' hometowns. Now, a lot of times the player characters, because of other campaigns they played at, will go okay, what should I know about this town? And you as the GM can comfortably, and again, this is judgment on the player that you're playing, but most players at a table can comfortably be I don't know. What is your old hometown like? You can just let them invent that space. Trust your player to understand that you're in a thing, or introduce something that completely throws you for a loop and gives you the exciting ability of explaining how that all connected. And then you can give them back the surprise in a push-pull between player and GM. If their stuff is this, and especially over the last few years, I look back on the campaign Brandon and I are in together. I look back on other things that I've done, and I would do this in a heartbeat now so many more times through the play of put the world and the stuff on the players that are comfortable doing that, because a lot of players at the table have also run games. It gives them ability to put their stamp on your world, and it's very unlikely, unless there's other toxic problems with a player, that they're going to do anything that will really hose up the whole thing, right? More than likely, most of your players are going to be oh, here's a couple neat facets, and then you fill in the gaps around that to make it all make sense. They're oh, I said that my parents were bakers. It's the most famous bakery in town. That doesn't affect whether they're going to kill God at the end of the campaign. That just gives you something to play with as a GM. And so your world building can constantly be underhand toss to your players, and then your players can underhand toss it back to you in a game of everybody gets surprised by what happens at the table. And ooh, man, is it satisfying when they do that. It feels so good. It makes like, everyone loves doing it, bringing that to the table. And the players that don't, you just don't do that with. If players are uncomfortable with that, they don't like that level of openness, that's fine. That player doesn't need that, and you don't have to do it for him.
I will say, as a player at Steve's table, one of my favorite moments in the game recently was when he asked me to give my rules for traversing the Nadenplatz. I absolutely love being able to sit down and come up with things. And I also, very much as a player who likes world building and wants to encourage not to create something so rigid that it would just be what I said it was. I wrote rules to be deliberately vague enough to give Steve other ideas to have fun with.
It's so good. Like, we already used a little bit of it. We're gonna use a little bit more of it here pretty damn quickly.
The only one that we've had of the 4 rules that have come up, only one of them has come up so far.
Yeah, and
so I'm excited to see what the other.
I'm not necessarily going to hit all of them, but I'm definitely going to hit a couple, or I'm definitely going to hit at least 2, probably 3 of them. And that kind of satisfaction in gameplay really makes it exciting for me, because again, essentially, even if you don't know it as a GM, even if you think of yourself as I'm a prep GM, I need to have, my NPC names lined up, I need to have what's going to happen lined up, or else I get flustered. Even in that, you are constantly improving against your players all the time. So this is a very easy way to kind of move in a half step towards something you already do in the game, which is improving with your players. Because that's all that happened there. Is I was like, what are 4 rules? We didn't have to do those rules immediately. I had time to think about those rules and how some interesting things I might do with them. And then I just kind of jotted them down in an email to myself somewhere, and then didn't look at them for a few weeks until the first one came up, and I was like, oh yeah, that idea, that's how I'm going to use that, and it's like 2 sentences that I wrote for myself based off that, and I was like, great, that's what we're going to do. And then the other one will be coming up here, and I wrote kind of where I want that to live. But again, I hadn't looked at it until relatively recently, when I was like, oh yeah, this is something I want to do. And I could remember, hey, I want to get to this thing eventually, plot-wise, and everything. And that's world building. The other thing about world building from the players out, from the player characters out, rather than your world in, is that it makes it so much more comfortable, I think, as a GM, for you to be flexible with who your players are playing at the beginning in your session zeros, because you don't have any expectations. You've really built, you're like, okay, we kind of have a theme and like a tone, and this is what I'm going for. This is how I like to run a game, kind of thing, and everything. And we're doing a big long campaign, so it's got to be epic, and you could have like as much backstory as you want, because we're gonna have plenty of time. And everything, you kind of set those, but like as far as what the players were, where they came from, and everything, I didn't have any expectations. So some of the world was built purely on just introducing the character, being like, I would like to play this from this kind of a family, and I'm like, all right, well, how does that fucking work? All right, okay, but the big thing is when you're